Good evening and welcome. What a fantastic evening it's going to be this evening. Of course, it's going to be a fantastic evening. You're here on the Open Door webinar show from Property CEO. My name's Richie Clapson, if you didn't know, and I'm here with the other half of Property CEO. I mean, he's a bit taller than me, but doesn't mean he's any better. Mr. Ian Child. Good evening, Ian.
Good evening. Hope you're all well, and yeah, good to see you all on this evening.
Good stuff. No, it's great to have you with us. And over the next 45 minutes, what are we going to be doing? Well, we're going to be taking a deep dive, as always, into the world of small-scale property development. Isn't that right, Ian?
Certainly is. We're going to be covering some of the latest news items, talking to some of the movers and shakers out there who can give us the inside track into kind of what's happening in the world of property and property development specifically. Also could be shining a bit of a spotlight on any areas we think could be a good opportunity for all you new developers out there to take a look at.
That's right. Look, but above all, and we always tell you this, we're here to have a bit of fun. We're not none of those normal webinars that are just droning on and on and on, and then try and sell you lots of stuff at the end. I might try and sell you something. I've got an old bike I'm trying to get rid of, but just email me, let me know if you're interested in that. But no, we're here to have a bit of fun. That's what it's about. Because life is definitely far too short not to. You're here on a Thursday evening, we've got to have a bit of fun. But we need you to join in, guys, okay? This is a question and answer show. Of course, if we don't have any questions in the chat box, and I can see we already have. If we don't have any questions, then we don't really have a show. So, Ian, what are we up to this evening? What are the plans?
Well, the plans this evening. Tonight, we're going to be talking to the one and only and our very favourite planning expert, Mr. Colin Smith. I think it's probably fair to say that the world of planning has been turned upside down a little over the last 18 months or so. So going to be really good to get an update on what's been happening recently. And I think also how, of course, for developers, how they can take advantage of those changes in 2021 and beyond. So should be good. I would say, as Richie mentioned, it's a question and answer show. So we will be answering your questions as we go through. So please do put them in the chat, and we'll do our very best to get through them all as we go through.
Hey, look, you've been told twice now, so you have to do it. Let's see who's on tonight's show. Jonathan's on. Good evening, John. Con's on. Hello, Con. Jed is on. Clive's on. Faisal's on. Hello, Faisal. I thought you've had enough of us today, but you've come on and come back with us. And Solomon, why not, eh? Michael's on. Hello, Michael. Just put your hand up and wave. Give us a wave if you can all see and hear us, okay? Give us a wave. Give us your hands up. Excellent. Simon's on as well. Jolin's on. Dan's on. Annal's on. Blimey, everyone's on. Jin's on. Helen's on. Tom's on. And what are they saying in the chat box? Good evening, gents, says Dan. Good evening, gents. Looking very dapper. Oh, thank you, Rory. Thank you. And Rory says, loving my property CEO mug. Yeah, those that wrote in when we did the 50th show, I gave away some free mugs in Ian's absence. I just went completely crazy that day. I know, but you know, if you're liking your mugs, that's great. Hi, Richie. Will we be talking about Class MA? I don't know, Thomas. You'll have to wait and see, because it's about questions. It's about answers. If you want to ask a question about MA, then you can do it. Good evening, Richie and Ian. Thanks for hosting, says Yoko. Well, imagine, Yoko, if we didn't host, it'd just be a blank screen. But there we go. Great to have you all on here. Hopefully, we're going to have a good evening. And, of course, we've got a guest coming up soon. But before we get him on, Ian, have we got any news items? You always like to do a bit of news items at the top of the show?
Always like to do a bit of news items at the top of the show. And in honour of our guest, I've got 3 items from the same place, from Planning Resource, which is an excellent read, actually. The first one here is a statement from a strategic economist at Yorkshire Building Society, who says that the UK housing market has lately defied all economic logic. They're trying to explain why there's been these record-breaking house market kind of facts and figures. They say prices have risen to record levels, sales are booming, despite the largest economic contraction in more than 300 years, and in contrast to every previous UK recession. They think that it might be due to the low level of supply, particularly family houses, and around 150 billion in excess savings in people's accounts since the first lockdown. And only some of that is yours, Richie.
Only a small proportion of that is mine.
That's the reason they think that well, anyway, no one can explain it. And then we've got another one here from the same source, and this is about a lot of things that are happening in the changes to the planning system. You may have seen in the news, it sparked a little bit of controversy, to say the least. Apparently it's losing people by elections left, right and centre. But there has been a heavyweight select committee report, which apparently means that, unlike most select committee reports which get ignored, this one is going to be sort of borne in mind by ministers. What they're planning to do, by the looks of things, as you may be aware, that the new idea is that areas are divided into these kind of zones where you've got protected zones, renewal zones, and growth areas. A lot of people think that that might not be the best way to go. So what do they recommend? They recommend that you might need more than 3 categories. They also recommend that members of the public should still have a say on individual planning applications. They reckon Section 106 should be retained. And they also think that developers who fail to build out their permissions within 18 months should be penalised. So they reckon they're going to give people 18 months to develop, then another 18 months to start, another 18 months to build. And then if you haven't built it by then, you're still going to get charged council tax on the properties that you haven't built, which should be an incentive. So that's they're recommending those 4 changes. So it remains to see what ministers take on board. And kind of linked to that final piece of news, there was, from an ecological perspective, quite a bit of good news, in as much as MPs have spoken overwhelmingly in favour of a new wild belt. So this is a land use designation that they reckon should be embedded within the planning system, which is basically going to protect those areas from a wildlife perspective. So looks like that was been put forward by the head of the Wildlife Trust. And yeah, MPs apparently like the idea, so that may well, in fact, happen. So there you go, a few bits from Planning Resource this week.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, do you know those comments about planning and zoning and whether developers should get penalised for not building out, etc., etc. I was actually commenting on that earlier this week. We had a BBC journalist ring us up and asked for an opinion. So I gave one of my honest opinions of what I thought about that. I'm not going to tell you what it is now. You might see it out there in the press at some point. But I was fairly honest. Yeah, I didn't agree with everything.
So now we've got ITV to speak to.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, good stuff. Well, let's see if our guest is here. As Ian said, he's our favourite planning consultant. I think he is. I think he is. I don't know. Do we know any others? Yeah, we probably do. But no, he's very, very good. Last on the show 6 months ago, and I know quite a few of you have emailed us in and said, can you bring Colin Smith back on the show? Well, guess what? We brought Colin Smith back on the show, so Colin is here this evening. Colin, can you hear us okay?
I can. Good evening, guys.
Excellent, Colin. Can you pop your camera on for us?
I'll have a go.
Have a go. Let's see if the technology works. There he is. Colin, good evening. Welcome back. It's 6 months,
thank you
Colin.
very much for having me back. I know. Yeah.
6 months. Since we
haven't
here.
changed a bit.
Yeah,
a little bit grayer, I think. A little bit grayer.
Yeah, but, maybe. But you, to be fair, you're always quite grey.
Yeah, I'm always quite. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Can you give us a wave, guys, if you can see and hear Colin? Give us a wave just so we know all the technology is working at your end. Hands are up. Thank you very, very much. Great stuff. Well, Colin Smith from CGS Planning, if you don't know, but what I'm going to ask Colin to do is give us a brief introduction of who he is, what he does. Just give us a few minutes overview, Colin, about, I don't know, what's going on at the moment, and then we'll dive into some questions. So, Colin, over to you.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Colin, CJS Planning, as Richie said, and I've been doing this man and boy for about 30 odd years. And if it's got a roof, I've probably done it, quite honestly. Yeah, and I like mixing in with the CEO chaps. And tonight, I'm hopefully going to be sharing a few bits and pieces. And do make sure you've got plenty of questions on the planning front, and I'll do my best to answer them. Well, what's been happening? Well, quite honestly, what hasn't been happening? We've had an absolute sea change, haven't we? As I often say, over the last 12 months, we've probably had 12 years worth of change. And not to mention all the new permitted development rights. And those of you who've heard me talk about those in the past know, I went into quite some depth about all of those. And we got 7 new permitted development rights, which enable you to basically have airspace extensions to go upwards. We've got 1 of those on residential, which means that you can put extra floors on a bungalow or any other sort of house. And you also got 6 others, which enable you to add floors to commercial and mixed commercial. And it's all very good and very, very exciting. However, in the meantime, as you probably know, is that with these new rules, we do get a lot of uncertainty. Our interpretation of what the rules means don't necessarily agree with what our dear planning officer's interpretation. And we had a few clashes. But luckily, a couple of important things have now come out from appeals. And I'd like to share those with you very, very briefly. The first one is all about design. Now, if you can imagine a Coronation Street scenario of a long terrace of houses, it's entirely possible using one of the PD rights to either add a flat on top of one of those houses, or indeed just put, an extra floor because you need it on one of those houses. And if you think about it, you're standing in the road looking at this terrace, and right bang in the middle, you've got this skyward protrusion, which under normal circumstances, I think that our dear planning officers would not like it under any circumstances at all. So, how do we get around this? Well, after a few of these have actually been refused, they went to appeal. And what the inspector effectively has said is that the street scene is not for consideration. Now, why did he say that? Well, basically, because the new PD rights were all about adding extra floors. So the government obviously want to boost housing supply, and they wouldn't have given us the rights to go upwards if they didn't really mean it. And, they're fully aware of the impact, if you like, on the character of the street scene. But on the other hand, if a local authority can then say, well, it doesn't fit, it goes against the grain of the thrust of what the government actually want to do. So street scene, very importantly, is not a consideration. We just look at the front elevation of the house only. And a little tip there, basically just copy and paste what's on the first floor and stick it on top. Simple as that. And you will get approved. And the other thing is that to try and thwart these permitted development rights, planning authorities have been using the NPPF, that's the National Planning Policy Framework, which is basically our overarching legislation. It's our Bible, more or less. And they try to use the clauses and paragraphs within that to say, well, basically, it doesn't fit with national policy. Well, again, more appeals have come through to say, well, yes, but only in the context of the NPPF. You can't then add your local policies to say that it doesn't fit. So in very broad terms, we look at the NPPF for a little bit of guidance, but local authorities can't use their local policies to say it doesn't work, which is actually quite interesting. So street scene, we're fine, and local policies we don't have to comply with. We just have to comply with the broad overarching rules of the NPPF. And these are quite significant appeal decisions. Now, the next thing that's come about is that arguably, permitted development was really to make use of redundant commercial buildings. As most of you are probably aware, the high street and the character of the high street is now changing. We've had discussions with Richie and Ian about this in the past. We think it's going to be more of an artisan type of character, if you like. But one thing that has come out of this, which is a bit of a ricket, and that is that most high streets are actually in conservation areas. And guess where you can't do these new permitted development rights? You can't do them in conservation areas. So the jury's out on that one, as it actually is how useful will these permitted development rights be. And there are some appeals going through as we speak, and hopefully I'll get invited back and I can give you a bit of an update on those. So what's the point of having a permitted development right for the high street when you can't use it because it's in a conservation area? So answers on the back of a postage stamp. Now, the next thing that we found is that apart from conservation areas, the next thing to trip us up is the date stamp. These new permitted development rights, well, most of them, 6 of them anyway, rely on a date stamp of 1948. Now, that date stamp 1948 came about because that's when the modern planning acts came into force, 1948. So therefore, if it hasn't got a planning record, therefore it was likely to have been built prior to 1948. Now, this 1948 date stamp is in fact tripping a lot of people up. How on earth can you work out when was a building or a house built? Well, the only surefire way is, well, you can look at land registry, but it is you have to go to the planning records to see when it was built. If there is a planning record, then chances are it's after 1948. And if there isn't one, chances are that it won't have one. So all your Victorian buildings, you basically put a red line through those. Now, this also has caused a bit of a problem because our lovely local authorities are under considerable strain at the moment. So to try and get an answer out of them as to what was the planning history of this particular building, you might have a long wait. But these are little pitfalls. Conservation areas and the date stamp 1948 are the things that are most likely to trip you up with the new permitted development rights. Okay, there was a query earlier on about Class MA. Well, I can talk about that all night, to be honest with you. But the idea of Class MA was to replace Class O, where you can take offices and turn them into residential. And Class MA kicks off on the 1st of August, and we're all looking forward to that. But there's another tripwire with Class MA that maybe some of you haven't thought about. One of the clauses is that it has to be vacant for 3 months prior to putting in an application. Now, this is all very good if you're looking at sourcing deals off a Rightmove, but what if you already own a property? What if you have tenants in there on a lease? Yeah. What do you do about that? Do you terminate the leases in some way? What happens about the revenue that you're going to lose while you're hopefully getting a planning permission? Well, not planning permission, permitted development. And it's by no means guaranteed, especially when Class MA is brand new and the planning officers have a different idea of how to determine applications than we do. So this Class MA clause of having to keep the building vacant for 3 months is going to be a bit of a problem. I can see that happening. And how do you prove it? How do you prove it was actually vacant for 3 months? So things to think about when you're getting all excited, you know, all about the leases and the occupancy of it. Anyway, lastly but not leastly, my good old favourite, you know I love Class G. I always go on about G, and I have a little rude joke about Class G, but I'm not allowed to say it anymore. Class G enables you to take a shop or a professional services use, and for each one that you have, you can put 2 flats over the top of it. You all know that, don't you? Well, there is a consultation that I believe has now finished, which means it's going to be put forward as a bill, and hopefully by the time we get to the 1st of August, it will become part of legislation. But my favourite Class G will now encompass all the new use classes in Class E. What does that mean? Well, it's very exciting, actually. Think of the opportunities, not only just shops and professional services like estate agents and accountants and stuff, right? But you can also do doctors and gyms and offices, right? And restaurants and anything else that was under Class E. Think now how that will now open things up. Now, Class G isn't law yet, but it is going through the paces. I fully expect that Boris and his team, they usually go for consultation after they've decided to do it, as you probably know. So I think that come the 1st of August, we have there's nothing solid about this, but I think come 1st of August, my favourite permitted development class, Class G, is now going to have new superpowers, and we can now use lots more changes of use. And that's the roundup for now. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, Colin. That is absolutely perfect. I think one thing, we're going to dive into some questions straight away in a minute, but one thing, guys, for all of you listening to this is why it's important to have a professional team around you. Have creative people, proactive people like Colin that are out there doing this stuff and is talking about what's happening, what consultation papers are going out there, and the little tricks, you know, ways you do things. So yeah, you've got to get yourself surrounded by good people. Ian, have we got a question to kick off with?
Well, straight out of the blocks, early as you like, was one from Jamie, who says, good evening, Jamie. What are the most common reasons for the refusal of a prior approval application? What are your thoughts on that, Colin?
Oh, blimey, I could talk for hours. Prior approval or prior notification. Now, this is the important thing to realise, okay, about permitted development. As long as you comply with the basic limitations of that permitted development class, you have got planning approval. It's approved by virtue of Article 3.1 of the General Permitted Development Order. That means you've been approved. However, with prior approval, what happens is that there are conditions that are attached to that particular class. Not all classes, but most of them. And that is just like when you go for planning permission. And before you can start work, you've got to discharge some conditions. So it's the same sort of idea, but this time round, you need to discharge your conditions before, or rather with, the prior notification process. The usual ones that we have to look at are transport, contamination, and we also need to look at, apart from that, I can't remember off the top of my head, but got me on the spot. But the one that trips people up most at the moment, mostly noise and disturbance, is space standards. People are not aware that new dwellings created through prior notification need to comply with space standards. And it's not just the well-known fact that the smallest studio can only be 37 square meters. It's also down to the width of the rooms as well. It's not just, the size of it and the occupancy levels, but it's actually the physical width and the size and the height, in fact, of things. And I've seen that a lot. I've seen one recent appeal that was granted because it was prior to the space standards coming in, but the local authority wanted to apply that, and then the inspector basically said, no, you're okay, but you are mindful that it wouldn't have complied now. Those space standards came in on the 1st of April. So I would say that's the number one thing that will trip you up. So you're looking at a property, you want to convert it into flats. Okay, I'll give you a little tip. Okay, you take the gross internal area of the building, all right, and you multiply it by 0.8. So you're basically taking off 20% of that area, okay, and then divide it by 37. And that will give you a good indication of how many studios or one-bed flats you can get in there. Okay, then you can work out your GDVs and everything from there. But yeah, space standards, that's the main thing that trips us up. And then number 2 on the list is natural light. You've got to make sure your windows are big enough, effectively. Right, do that one.
There we go, Jamie. I hope that answers your question. Richie.
Michelle's question. Michelle says, question for Colin, which is great that she said question for Colin, because you're the guest tonight, Colin. So I like that.
Good job here.
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. She says, I saw a big house in its grounds was a social club for community. It will be D2 to F2 now, won't it? Would it convert to 10 flats? Do I need planning, or will PD do it? So basically a social club. Can she get any PD rights on a social club, says Michelle. I think that's the gist of it.
How can you have, I mean, I've got a social club in my garage, but that doesn't really count, does it? I mean, how do you have a social club in the grounds of your house? I'm quite intrigued by that. Does it have any PD rights? Sorry?
Don't ask me.
Yeah. Does it have any PD rights under that? I would actually say more than likely it doesn't. I would say that the use class isn't that straightforward, and I would say that the use class is more likely to be sui generis, which means that it is of its own kind, and anything which is sui generis, like a pub, for example, doesn't have any permitted development rights. I would need a lot more information than that, to be honest. Just the fact you've got a social club in your back garden makes me think, that's interesting. So, no, I don't think you do. I think it'll be a full planning application, subject to a little bit more information on that.
There you go, Michelle. Well, you can reach out to Colin. We'll give you Colin's details at the end of the show. If you want a commission of you, are more than welcome. And of course, anyone that wants to join Colin's social club in his garage, please also apply to CGS Planning. Membership tickets are available after we come out of lockdown. Ian, what's next?
We've got one in from Jed. Good evening, Jed. Jed asks, if there's, this is going back to your previous point, if there's relaxation to the street scene for upward extension, does that then also apply to other changes that might cause you to alter the street scene?
I don't understand the question, to be honest with you. What we're saying.
I think you made a point earlier about the fact you sort of that relaxation about when we're doing an upward extension. You made a reference point about them not being able to take the street scene into account. Are there other scenarios where the LPA also are no longer able to take the street scene into account for other permissions.
That not other permissions. This is and specifically it's for the Part 20 stuff. The new Part 20, which is where you're able to add flats on top of other flats and mix commercial and commercial. So I would say that's the primary one, to be honest. I don't think there are other scenarios that affect the street scene in that way. As I say, it's all about the government wanted us to boost housing. And, you know, if they didn't want us to go with an airspace extension, then they wouldn't have allowed us to do it in the first place, you know, if it was subject to the character of the street scene. So I don't think so, to be honest, no.
Fantastic. Jed, I hope that answers your question. What we got next, Richie?
Okay, let me pick up. I might pick up a couple here actually, because they're sort of similar type questions. Tony says, first of all, she says, evening, Colin. Can I ask, does the new permitted development rule to convert use Class E buildings have a 56, this is Class MA, have a 56-day rule as we used to have for offices?
Short answer, no, it doesn't. Yes, you ought to be determined within 56 days, but there's no guaranteed automatic approval if they don't determine it that. Another important point on that is that there was a court case came about last year, it might have been, or year before, and then it was then rectified by another court case in that you always get approval after your 56 days. However, if the local authority, this is the new court case, if the local authority asks you for an extension of time, then your 56 days right has basically been removed. On the new PD rights, to do with Part 20, where you're putting up extensions on commercial buildings, there is a 56-day consultation period, but you do not get automatic approval after that, which is a shame. And the local authority are very likely to ask for an extension of time. And if you decline that extension of time, you probably get refused. So, yeah, not really. Interestingly enough, when we're talking about Class MA, that is a prior notification for a change of use only, not just the building work. Now, that still does have the 56-day. So you do get the approval of that. And it replaces Class M, but Class M is not gone altogether. The old use class of the shops and so on, they've been taken out of it, but things like laundrettes, obscurely, are still now covered by Class M. So we can still convert laundrettes, but under the old Class M, which has been updated. That was a very long-winded answer for a simple question, wasn't it?
That's good. Well, the other one I was going to string to, which was about offices as well. So let me ask this from Joseph, because Joseph says, will the new PD rules for Class E, AA, obviously the MA ones, supersede the current PD rules for offices under Class O? And with this, will it mean now we're now restricted to a maximum of 1,500 square metres?
There's two questions. Class O has actually been revoked, removed, and that's on the 1st of August, and that is when MA kicks in. And MA does have a maximum of 1,500 square metres, which is quite a lot actually. And you don't have to use all the 1,500. So if you only got 100 of it, you can just do 100 and leave the rest alone if you wanted to. So it's quite flexible in that way.
There you go, Joseph. That's answered that question. Ian, what's next? Who have you got next?
I got one in from Con, who asks, B1C buildings are now eligible for conversion to residential using Class MA. Well, they will be from the 1st of August. I often find it difficult to know whether a building will be deemed B1C or B2. What are the initial things I should check that might allow me to say with confidence that this building will likely be deemed B1C by the council? Thoughts on that?
That's a good question. B1C is the sort of industrial process that you would typically find in a residential area, whereas B2, which is more heavy industrial, a factory, for example, is more likely to be somewhere maybe a bit more isolated or in a trading estate or something. So somebody who's got a small little carpentry business, or maybe they make plastic windows or something like that, that is probably going to be light industrial, and it's the sort of thing where guys sort of work out of the back of their garage in the town, or whatever that is. And the bigger stuff, take the extreme of car manufacturing, for example, that would definitely be B2, because it's more of an industrial process rather than a lightweight one. So if it's in the town or in more of a resi area, it's very likely to be B1C. If it's anywhere bigger than that and they've got a car plant or something, it's very likely to be B2.
Fantastic. So actually good news, because we've got the right to convert to residential, and we want it for the ones that are actually in residential areas, which is B1C.
Exactly that.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Con, thank you very much for your question. Richie, what have we got?
I've got Ranjit on from Property Investor News, who says, good evening, Richie and Ian, and good friend Colin. Oh, you've been called good friend.
Hi, Ranjit. How you doing?
Yeah, I think he's just about himself. Property Investor News. I've never heard of that magazine. Is it any good?
Apparently, it's quite good. Yes.
Oh, it's worth a read. Definitely worth a read. Okay. I've got a question here from, where was this one? Thomas. Thomas has got a question. Thomas says, Colin, how big is this opportunity for property investors? Is it actually an opportunity or hype? I'm assuming he's talking about all the stuff that's going on with planning. Is it actually an opportunity or hype, in your opinion?
In my opinion, there are lots of trapdoors, and that's why you need a planning consultant to actually work out what the quirks and the hacks and the loopholes are. I pointed out a few earlier in my quick summary at the very beginning, that's a good example of the sort of things that can trip you up. But I'm obviously going to say use a planning consultant. There's plenty of good guys out there, but it's a good idea to do that, or get yourself educated so that you understand precisely what it is that you're looking for, and you know precisely what those tripwires are. And there are a few, but once you've done one or two of them, then you'll be much more aware. So do
you think it's an opportunity? You've given the warnings about the tripwires and so on, but I mean, a lot of people will ask this. They see a lot of what one might call hype, because it sounds really exciting, sounds too good to be true, that the door's open for people to come and do development. But do you think it's a good opportunity? Do you see new developers coming in and doing some good stuff?
Do I think so? I think that once the wrinkles have been ironed out, yes, definitely. It's a little bit like the airspace extensions. When they first came about, everybody went mad and had a go at doing them. And then the local authorities had, they like to protect their buildings, to be honest. And they had other ideas and refused them. And now we've had a few appeals. We've sort of got a much more clarity on it all. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I think there's going to be a big flurry of activity come August. And then there'll be a few refusals, more than likely. And then we'll have some appeals. So by this time next year, we'll know exactly where we're going. Now, I will hark back to my favourite PD class, Class G, though. If that kicks off, that will definitely be a game changer. And I'll be talking about that in a lot more detail when I visit you all at Basingstoke, propertyCEO. And I'll be there live and in person. I'll be talking about this wonderful new changes to Class G, amongst other things.
I have to say, Colin, they won't all be there, because they're not all students.
Right.
So there are definitely some of our students. So those that are student of ours, if you're doing academy days when Colin turns up at the end of next month, actually, then you'll meet him. If not, if you're not one of our students, you won't. But unless you turn up at Basingstoke and look through the window, it's entirely up to you. Here, what have we got next?
Right, we got one in from Harvey. Good evening, Harvey. Hope you're well. He says, I've got planning to convert a 2-story house into 3 flats, one on the ground, one on the first floor, and one in the loft. Could we, under permitted development, add a further floor?
No. If you had added the floor prior to getting the permissions for the flats, then yes, it has to be on the original building. So if you haven't built it yet, then get yourself a permitted development right approval for the extra floors, and then have a new application for your flats. The principle of flats has already been approved. What you really want is some extra flats on top, don't you? So do that first, get your flats on top first, okay, and then resurrect your already approved application. And really, providing that you can comply with the normal amenity, parking standards and stuff like that, then yeah, you're good to go. But you can't do your PD on top of a planning permission, I'm afraid. Otherwise, it'd be like dominoes, it'd never stop, would it? So, yeah.
There you go, Harvey. I hope that answers your question. Richie, what's next?
Okay, this says, hi, my question for Colin. What do you think needs to happen to get the current planning backlog back on track? The current delays are, and I hate to use this word, unprecedented, but they are. When do you think there will be light at the end of the tunnel? How is your crystal ball looking, Mr. Smith? This is from Yvonne. Yeah, well, sorry, but this is, I'm just reading it out, Colin. That's all I'm doing.
Right. The planning system is unfortunately verging on being broken if it's not already broken. Planning departments simply do not have the resources. They don't pay enough, in my honest opinion. Back in the day, 25 years ago, and I've often said this, if you had a planning problem, you could go down to your planning department, have a cup of tea and a biscuit with the planning officer and sort it out and get it done. Now it's all about young graduate planners, let's say, who are looking at the rule book, and that rule book is constantly changing. And they're forever looking for advice and guidance by their line manager, whatever a line manager is. And and there's always a conflict of opinion from the grassroots, if you like, up to where it gets signed off. That happens all the time. So the first thing is you've got to increase staff levels. Second thing is you've got to increase your salaries. What's the incentive to actually work in local authority? Well, the main incentive is to get yourself a bit of background knowledge. And as soon as you've got a couple of years under your belt, you're going to go and work for private practice, aren't you? I mean, it makes sense. Long gone are the days of the golden watch and everything. You don't get that sort of thing anymore. So that's fundamentally where it is. Now, already, many local authorities are already subcontracting out planning duties, okay? And that's not good either. You want people with local knowledge and, with some sort of, I could say, to be connected with their local authorities, to be connected with their community. I think that's very, very important. So how do we fix it? You've got to put money into the thing, quite honestly. The government are totally aware of that. That's why we've got all these permitted development rights. The idea is to streamline the system. Local authorities are very protective of their buildings and their communities. They don't like permitted development, obviously. There's a conflict there. And, how do we fix it? It's never been great, but it's getting worse. It's definitely getting worse. It used to take 2 weeks to maybe validate an application. Nowadays, it's 4-6 weeks just to validate. You don't get very much communication from a planning officer until maybe a week before the determination date, and then they ask for an extension of time, and so on and so on and so on and so on. The whole point about this is that we want to build stuff. We want to build the correct stuff in the right places, but we need to do it quickly. There's a government wish to build 300,000 new dwellings a year. Well, that isn't going to happen, not with the system as it is right now. So in my humble opinion, it's about paying the guys more money, and we want more guys. And it's as simple as that, incentivize them to stay with the councils and, be invested in their councils. That's it, really. Otherwise, we're going to be doing battle forever, aren't we?
Thank you, Colin. Yvonne, hopefully that gives you an opinion. Ian, what's next?
Yeah.
Now, I've got a question here from Joe. Good evening, Joe. Do any of the Article 4 restrictions that restrict office conversions under Class O roll over to Class MA, or will Article 4 not be automatically applied?
Another good question. Article 4 for offices in particular have been rolled over until 2022. Which will give the local authorities plenty of time to redraft their Article 4 directions. As it stands, if they hadn't have done that, because the use classes change from B1A, which is an office, to a class I think is EB or something, I can't remember, then basically it circumvents the Article 4 direction, which is not the point. So yeah, it is being rolled over, and your Article 4 preventing office to resi will continue. However, when you come to Basingstoke, I will tell you about a loophole using my beloved Class G and how you can get around that.
Well, as it happens, I think Joe is coming to Basingstoke, so Joe, you'll be fine. Okay. Jolion's question here: what PD rights remain in place for pre-1948 properties after the 1st of August? I'm looking at a Victorian ex-residential property now used as a commercial office showroom. It looks like since the 1980s, but now long-term vacant. It's 2-story, and he would like to extend and convert to residential. Any PD rights likely to help?
Right, all the new stuff, which is the new Part 20, which came in last September. The answer is no. There is a date stamp 1948. But all your Part 1 stuff, which is all about enlargement and alterations to a dwelling house, they still are in force and alive and kicking. They apply to the house as it stood on or after 1948. So a Victorian house, for example, can still have permitted development rights for a loft conversion and extensions and all that stuff. Yeah. In this particular case, if I heard you right, it has a bit of commercial use in there as well.
It sounds like it's now been changed over to commercial since the 1980s. It looks like it's a commercial office of some description.
Right. Well, again, it's subject to detail, isn't it? The devil's in the detail. I would need to have a look at that for you. But as you've described it right now, I don't think, if it was built before 1948 and you're trying to take advantage of the new Part 20 rights, for example, the answer is no. If you're trying to do the new use class changes, the chances are possibly. It all depends on the circumstances of the building. I'll be positive and say yes. There you go. But I would need to see it in a bit of detail.
John, it's all in the detail. Ian, let's see if we can do one last question. It is 1:45, but let's get one last question. Make it a good one.
I'll make it a cracker. This is a question that I hear a lot, and it's been put in by Jen, who asks, what if an existing building has several different uses? How would it be classed in terms of its current use class in the system?
Well, yeah, that's a good one. There is a law, a judicial authority called Birdall, and this was way back in the day, and effectively a use needs to occupy a planning unit, and a planning unit is whereby it is functionally and physically separate. So you could have, as an example, on the ground floor, a retail use, a separate flight of stairs going up to the first floor, which is all about offices. Now, the retail and the office are functionally and physically separate. Therefore, they both have separate permitted development rights. Okay, that's how you would define that. Quite often, you would find there's a bit of a mix. An example of that would be a department store. They could sell something on one floor and something else on another floor, but in effect, it's all one unit, and therefore it's a mixed use or a sui generis use. So it's all about functionally and physically separate to take advantage of the different permitted development rights, different permitted development classes. So again, each one needs to be looked at on its own merits. But it's entirely possible that you could do one lot of PD on the ground floor, which is a shop, and an entirely different lot of PD on the upper floors, because it's an office. Having said that, we've got new Class MA, which enable you to do the whole lot and wrap it up. And dare I say it, we also got Class G, which does much the same thing as well. So yes, functionally and physically separate.
Jen, there you go. That's the answer. And of course, enlist the help of your local friendly planning consultant to make doubly sure.
Yes.
I like the way you finished on the Class G, because it is your favourite.
It is.
Yeah, good
I'll say it again.
Colin, it's been a pleasure to have you on. Give us a wave if you enjoyed that tonight. There's lots of thanks coming in the chat box. Put your hands up if you enjoyed that. Yeah, flashing on and off, Colin. Absolutely unanimous. Brilliant, brilliant. I love a comment in here from Callan, says, awesome answers. Thank you for the session. Made my mind spin a bit. Colin, we'll get you back again. For those of you that are students of ours that are coming to your Academy Day in the end of July, I know some of you aren't, and that your Academy Days are later, but those that are in for a treat. We haven't announced it, but Colin's announced it to you guys that he will be coming to see you on the Academy Day. We were going to keep it a secret, but the cat's out the bag. So, guys, that is going to be a great session. Colin's going to come and see us at the end of July for your first Academy Day, those that are doing that. Colin, thank you very much. We will get you back another time. What's the best contact details for you, Colin?
Oh, crikey. I'll tell you what, you email in to see with Richie and Ian, and they'll have my contact details there. I'll tell you why, because they're changing. They're changing.
I'll tell you what we do, Colin. If you can let our team know, what we do, guys, is we'll put them up on the show notes, okay? If they're not up there straight away next week, if Colin's changing them, then we'll do it in due course. You can always email into us if you want to contact Colin. So it's support@propertyceo.co.uk and say, put me in touch with Colin, and we'll do that. If not, what we do is we'll put Colin's details up on the show notes. They'll all be up on YouTube or on our website, hopefully Monday next week. Colin, thank you very much. We'll let you go and enjoy the rest of the evening. We'll get you back another time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks,
Lovely to see you all. Thank you very much indeed for having me.
Thank you, mate. Cheers.
Yeah. Wow, wasn't that good?
Wow, that was great. That was really good. I love the fact that Callan said you're making your head spin. There's so much knowledge, isn't there? And I think the thing, guys, when you're looking at this stuff, this is why you need a good team around you. You know, and I know, you know, we have a few of our students that come onto this show, and that's great. And you can see, you know, we talk to you about a lot of this stuff, but guys like Colin are so knowledgeable, and there's so much of this. So yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed that show. Now, next week's show is Thursday. It's on Thursday, same time at 7 o'clock. And we have another treat for you. We have a great friend of the show, which is Russell Hartnell Parker. He is an auctioneer from Fox & Sons. He's going to come and tell us all about what's going on out there in the world of auction. So that is going to be a real treat for you next week. If anyone is interested, if this is your sort of first time delving your foot into property, you are more than welcome to come and spend 3 hours with myself and Ian. I know that's not a great sell. Come and spend 3 hours with myself and Ian completely for free. You can use this link and it'll take you to a free event that we're running. I think we've got some in a week or so's time. propertyceo.co.uk/roadmap. If you want to come and spend 3 hours with us, and we'll give you a whole load of information and content all about getting into property development and where the opportunities are. I very quickly want to pick something up that was asked at the beginning of the show, and it wasn't a question about Colin, but Tanya put it in very quickly. If Tanya's still with us, I think she is. She basically said, you know, she's struggling to find deals. No, nothing is stacking. Well, with all due respect, Tanya, there are deals out there and people are getting them. It's where you look, how you do it, and how you sweat that asset. Certainly, do not sit tight and wait. There's deals out there. They are out there now. You just need to know where to look and what to look for. And by the way, she says, thank you for your mug. But Tanya, I just want to give you that reassurance. Don't give up. It's about perseverance. The deals are out there. You need to know where to look and you need to know what's the deal. Please, guys, put in the chat box if you enjoyed tonight's show. We always like to hear that. It just, well, it makes it worthwhile, doesn't it? So you enjoyed it tonight, Ian?
I've loved every second of it. I'm going to rush out and get my I Love Class G t-shirt on the back of Colin's comments. I might even wear it on next week's show.
Good stuff. Let's have a look. Simon says, thank you. Oh, that's very polite, Simon. Thank you very much. Thank you, Simon. Raj says, fantastic show, gentlemen. Rory says, excellent. Thanks, says Faisal. Thanks, Colin. Great answers. He's gone now, Yvonne. I don't know why he's saying that. Great session. Thank you. Thanks for a great session, gents. Thank you. Great session. Great session. Thank you, Colin and team. Ranjit from Property Investor News. Grazie, says Michael. Awesome, says Harvey. And great as always, says Rob. Well, we think so. We enjoy it. See you next week, same time, same place. Good night now. Bye-bye.